Let's look at the 11 stages of financial independence. Be sure you stay until the very end, where I've saved the most freeing and financially rewarding stage for last. If you're new to the channel and want to learn how to make more money, subscribe and click the bell. That way you never miss a video. Stage 0. Financial dependent. A financially dependent person depends on other people for survival, their daily expenses, or luxury purchases. A financially dependent person will have less assets than liabilities, meaning he or she will have a negative net worth. A financially dependent person is having to constantly borrow from others in order to live. Financially dependent people also have a negative net cash flow. This means that they are unable to keep their cash inflow higher than their cash outflow. Cash inflow could be things like dividend income from stocks, disposable income, and business income from a side business. Cash outflow could be things like basic survival expenses. So if someone is financially dependent, they are likely spending more than they are earning. Now, here's the thing. Being financially dependent can be a good or a bad thing. It all depends on what that person builds up in his assets. Stage 1. Financial solvency. When a person reaches financial solvency, they could still have a negative net worth, but the important thing is that they stop borrowing more money from family, friends, and unsecured lending. Another important distinction of financial solvency is that the person's net cash flow is positive. Financially solvent people get freedom from stress and anxiety since they are no longer behind on their bills. This is a huge psychological benefit. Once a financially solvent person has a positive net cash flow, they can start paying off their debts, setting money aside to build wealth, and saving for other goals. Stage number 2. Financial stability. Usually a person who is financially stable has also reached the stage of financial solvency too. Once a person is able to build up their emergency funds, they are considered to have reached financial stability. It could even be argued that building up an emergency fund is even more important than paying off debt. For example, you could be paying off all of your debts with all of your extra cash, but if you didn't have an emergency fund in place, one major trip to the hospital could have you turning to your family, friends, or credit card for the extra cash. This will set you back more. Having an emergency fund of $3,000 can be very helpful. This way, you'll know that you're covered even when times get rough. Stage number 3. Debt freedom. Once you pay off all of your debts, you are considered to have reached the stage of debt freedom. This can seem overwhelming for a lot of people since their mortgage is usually 25 to 30 years, which would mean that they would have a long time before they reach the point of being debt-free. However, a person is considered to be at the point of debt freedom when they have paid off all of their high-interest debt with the exception of mortgage debt. Mortgage debt tends to have the lowest interest since banks can foreclose and sell the house and because of the duration. Furthermore, having a home is an important part of life. Typically, a person who has reached the stage of debt freedom has also completed the other stages before it. Stage number 4. Accumulated 1 year's worth of annual expenses. So let's say that you have done away with most of your high-interest debt, and now all you're left with is the low-interest mortgage debt. Now it's time to start building wealth. When it comes to accumulating wealth, the first stepping stone you want to reach is to have 1 year's worth of annual expenses covered. This gives you more control over your life and allows you to stop being a slave to your job and to debt. So, for example, if you spend about $30,000 each year, then your first milestone should be to save up $30,000. This puts you in control and gives you more options in the future. Let's say you are unfulfilled at your job and want to do something different. Having 1 year of expenses saved up allows you to quit your job and find a new career. You can do this with confidence, and it'll be much less stressful since you know that you'll at least be covered for a full year. Stage number 5. Accumulated 5 years' worth of annual expenses. Once you have a year's worth of expenses saved up, it's time for you to focus on accumulating 5 years' worth of annual expenses. Let's stick with that same example from earlier. Let's say your annual expenses are around $30,000 a year. Once you have accumulated $150,000, you would be able to take 2 years off to explore the world if you wanted to, and then come back to work. Stage number 6. Accumulated 10 years' worth of annual expenses. Similar to stage 4 and 5, stage 6 is focused on accumulating an even larger sum of money. Here you will obtain 10 years' worth of annual expenses. At stage 6, you would have accumulated a larger sum than the previous stages. You will try to build up 10 years of your annual expenses. So if your annual expenses are about $30,000, then accumulating $300,000 would give you a lot of extra stability. The main distinction between this stage and the next stage, stage 7, is that in the next stage, your money is working for you and providing cash flow while leaving the capital intact. Whereas this stage, stage 6, assumes you will spend down your starting capital. When you have 10 years worth of annual expenses, this allows one spouse to be a stay-at-home mom for 10 years, for example. Stage number 7, financial security. Once you accumulate wealth, you can put your money into financial assets and investments. This could be rental properties, starting and running a business, or investments that pay out dividends. A person reaches financial security when his or her financial assets are bringing in a cash flow that is greater than the yearly essential expenses. Now, keep in mind that the essential expenses are not all of your expenses. Essential expenses are simply the bare minimum that you need for yourself and your family to survive. So even if your annual expenses are $30,000 a year, your essential expenses might only be $14,000 a year. Financial security gives a person another level of control and more options. This could allow someone to work part-time, take a break from work, or take more risks in his or her career without having to worry too much about the finances. Your basic survival is no longer determined by your employer, it is determined by you. Stage number 8, financial independence. A person reaches this stage when their financial assets and investments are making more than his or her current yearly expenses. Just because someone has a luxury car doesn't mean they are rich. If a person has rental properties and an investment portfolio that is putting out enough money for him or her to be fully covered right now, that's the sign of a truly wealthy person. Stage number 9, financial freedom. At this point, your investments are paying out more than your yearly expenses, and you're able to afford a few extravagant things that you might not have thought about. At this stage, you're able to give yourself and your family some of the finer luxuries of life, like that Range Rover you've always wanted, or that trip to Europe your spouse has always dreamed of. Once you reach financial freedom, you're able to do more things with your money that weren't possible before. Before I move on to the last stage, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe and click the bell. That way, you'll be the first to see my next money-making video. Also, type the word yes down in the comments below if you are going to take the necessary actions today to bump up your financial life to the next stage. Stage number 10, financial abundance. At this stage, a person is rich enough to the point that his financial assets and investments are bringing in so much money that yearly expenses can pretty much take a back seat. Here you can provide for yourself and your family and any other goals that you might have, and the money still won't run out. Of course, careful guidelines still have to be taken into consideration. Once you reach this stage, you're able to buy that mountain home in Colorado that you always wanted. You can help support your nephew through college out of goodwill, and you can make large donations to a charity of your choice. Basically, at this point, you have more than enough to buy what you want and help others. So now that you know what stage number 10 and financial abundance looks like, you might want to do everything you can to get there. You might even want to invest in dividends to help you reach this goal. If you want to learn how to make $400,000 a year in dividends, then click the video on the screen. Here, I'll tell you everything you need to know about how to use Peter Thornhill's strategy for dividend investing.